Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. We are almost finished with the life of David. We are in 1 Chronicles chapter 28 and verse 11, coming to some of the last events of his life, and they end with some very, very good lessons for us. Then David gave his son Solomon the plans for the vestibule, its houses, its treasuries, its upper chambers, its inner chambers, and the place of the mercy seat, and the plans for all that he had by the Spirit. Today I want to focus on the fact that David had a successor. I like what John Maxwell said, there is no success without a successor. We've talked about this at different points in the life of David. We talked about how Absalom had no son, so he had to build a monument to himself. But what we see is David actually modeling that he had built a very impressive empire, a kingdom, and he was able to pass it off to a successor. So I want to talk to anybody who's leading really just leading and influencing others, and that is, who are you training and developing to take your place? Now you might be going, well, I'm just a mom, I'm just a dad. Yes, but your job is to train up your kids to grow up and be successful in the calling of God inside of their life. So you are responsible for raising up as future successors, next generation, called your kids. Inside of any business position, you should always be bringing somebody along that you're duplicating and developing yourself into. So I love this statement. There is no success without a successor. And we say that here at Element Church in our culture quite a bit. So the question is, who are you raising up to take your job? How are you working yourself out of a job? Now you might be going, that sounds very intimidating, to work myself out of a job. Just want to reassure you with this. If you're a good enough leader that you can raise up somebody that's qualified to take your job, no boss in their right mind would ever let you go, because the person who can duplicate themselves is the most valuable of the players on their team. And so you'll actually just find that your gift will continue to make room for you. And so always be looking at how you can train up successors. If we should be raising up successors, why don't more people do this and do this well? I think there's three top reasons why people don't raise up successors, don't duplicate themselves. And I think number three would be this, and we're going to start at three and work down to what I think is the number one. Number three, just the attitude of, I can do it better. And the truth is, you probably can. As a parent, this is why so many moms are exhausted today. You keep cleaning your kid's room. Why? Because you can do it better. You know what? But your kid's 10 years old. Let your kid learn to clean their room. If you're going to continually pick up after them, clean up after them, yes, you can do it better, but you're going to be exhausted. And so initially on the front end, when you are duplicating yourself into other people, you have to give some slippage. You have to allow for a little bit of quality dip and just go, that's going to be okay. We're going to put grace into the quality dip, knowing that that quality will eventually get back up where it needs to be. Because the bigger win is that you duplicated yourself into someone else. And so when your kids are learning to clean their room, yes, it's not going to be as clean as you want it, but you just come in behind them and then just go, hey, look at this here. What about this here? And you just coach them along the way and just learn to be okay. Because the bigger win in life is what you're developing your kids to be, not that they had a clean room. The second thing is this: it takes too much time. And this is true. It does take a lot of time to stop and teach somebody how to do a task, teach somebody how to think, teach somebody how to process, make decisions, and do certain things. And yeah, it does take time. But what you'll find is the investment on the front end will pay huge dividends on the back end. Anytime I take time to go, hey, let me teach you how to do this, let me share with you how to do that, there's a lot of coaching on the front end. But man, once that person's turned loose and they're running and gunning, what you'll find is, the rewards on the back end are exponential. You'll actually gain more time by investing time on the front. And I think this is the number one reason people don't develop successors, and that's just generally it's insecurity. I think a lot of people just are insecure and they're threatened that this person they raise up will either take their place or do a better job than them, and people give them more acclamation or affirmation and, hey, way to go. And so I think insecurity is why most people don't develop others to take their place. And what I see here in David's life is he was very secure. He was secure. And we know this, Solomon expanded the kingdom beyond David's domain. In fact, the pinnacle of the amount that Israel controlled territorially was under Solomon's reign, not David's reign. The greatest prosperity that they ever had was under Solomon's reign, not David's reign. They had the greatest seasons of peace, times without war, under Solomon's reign, not David's reign. And I go, yes, Solomon did more, was wiser than anyone, wiser than David. And I go, I think David was proud of the fact that he could have a successor who went further, who did more, and was more successful. And so I think we often are insecure because we're really looking at success wrong. Success is not how great I can be. Success is how great can I help somebody else to be. And so if you're continually threatened by someone you're raising up who actually may become better than you at something, then your natural tendency is to kind of suppress that or put a lid on that, and that's not good. I have a staff member who used to preach from time to time at one church, and somebody in passing said to the senior pastor, "Hey, man, that so-and-so, he did an amazing job this weekend." Well, that pastor who battles insecurity, that was the last time that person ever preached again at that church on the weekend pulpit, because he couldn't manage in his heart that staff member did a good job and people in the church like that, and he was getting praise and affirmation, this particular staff person. And so what he did is he put that person aside. And inside of that culture, there was this unspoken, but it was there, and that is the greater the gap between the senior pastor as a communicator and his teaching team, the bigger the gap, the more secure and more important that pastor felt. Where the truth is the opposite. The more a pastor and a leader can close the gap between other communicators, the better and the more valuable that senior leader is to the church or to any organization. So the goal as a leader is to close the gap, not highlight the gap. And this, if you're insecure, what you're always going to do is you're going to always hire leaders that are several levels below you in capacity, and because you feel better because you're a 9 and they're a 7 or a 6. But that's the lid to the organization. What you want to do is, as a 9, you want to hire 10s, or you want to take 8s and turn them into 10s. That's what a successful leader does. Here at Element Church, I have a strong teaching team who continually gets stronger because it's part of my responsibility to take a lot of time. We have systems in place and structures in place to where we sit down, we go through the messages together. I'm speaking into every message. We as a teaching team are all weighing into everybody's message because together we're better. So we're all learning together. That sermon went through a refining process where we got to take the value of all the years of experience of the whole teaching team, and it's just better. And so we all sound better. But that gap between me and other communicators ideally is continuing to shrink and get smaller, not necessarily bigger. And a lot of times I have to manage that inside of my own heart to go, my win is that they won. And when they're winning, I'm winning. And so I think overall that's where we should be landing and moving towards as leaders. David wasn't as concerned about who did it as that it got done. And so if it's always having to be you and you're always having to be in the limelight, you're going to be the lid to your business, your organization, to your church, to your department. And just know the greatest, most valuable leaders are the ones who work themselves out of a job.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at PastorEricLawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.